Welcome to The Charm of It, where I discuss pursuing coziness whilst living in a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist society in need of toppling. If you're a returning viewer, it is so wonderful to see you again, and if you're a new viewer, welcome to my little corner of the internet. If you enjoy people doing deep dives into their hobbies, then you're in the right place. I'm Eva, a chronically ill, endlessly curious, disabled bookworm who uses she, her pronouns. I live with my partner Joel within sight of Lake Ontario on Haudenosaunee homeland, specifically that of the Onondaga, the keepers of the Western Hill, known to settlers as the Seneca. I live on this land because settlers carried out a systematic ethnic cleansing campaign, including General George Washington during the Revolutionary War, who ordered the razing of villages and winter food stores. Despite all that, the Haudenosaunee Nation continues, and they actually have one of the best lacrosse teams in the world. It's led by Lyle Thompson, and it has come in second, I believe. One moment. So they finished third in the last two field lacrosse championships and second in all 5 of the World Box Lacrosse Championships. They travel on Haudenosaunee passports, which can occasionally create problems with international travel. And they also are competing with nations hundreds and thousands of sizes bigger than them population-wise, and yet they continue to triumph. Lacrosse is likely to become an Olympic sport in 2028, and so the Iroquois team, I believe the Iroquois Nationals, are petitioning to play in those Olympics as members of their own nation, the Haudenosaunee Nation, and not as anything to do with the United States and Canada. I really hope that this happens. And I have included a link down below in case you are interested in more information. Oh, I almost forgot to mention, the Haudenosaunee created lacrosse, and in their traditions it has both athletic and religious meanings, which are very impactful. So that's a little bit included in the article that I linked to as well. Today I am talking about books, and I'm really excited to get into that. This will be a little bit new for me. I've included book sections in my knitting podcast, but I haven't done an episode that is only about literature. However, I started my life as kind of a internet socializer, social media, with a book blog. So the idea of gushing about books that I love is very far from new for me. So today I'm going to be talking about Lavinia by Ursula K. LeGuin, American Fairy Tale by Adriana Herrera, and Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. Lavinia by Ursula K. LeGuin is a historical novel, and it's very historical. It's set along the Italian peninsula outside what will eventually be Rome, but before the Romans exist. And it's set among the Latium people who are mentioned in the Aeneid. And Lavinia herself is mentioned in the Aeneid, but she never speaks. So Le Guin decided to write a novel that gives her perspective, and it is beautiful. I will admit I have a rocky relationship with Le Guin. I didn't read her growing up. I know a lot of people did, especially people who enjoy speculative fiction, which I very much do. But somehow I didn't run across her. So the first book of hers that I read was The Left Hand of Darkness, which I read probably 10 years ago, because a lot of book bloggers love it, and it is, I think it's a feminist classic in many ways, and it's written as with a planet without our gender binaries. And so I went into it expecting, I'm not sure what, but I certainly didn't expect that all the pronouns would be he. And I think I can understand that that was revolutionary at the time, but reading it 10 years ago, it just didn't have the same impact on me. And especially compared to books like Ammonite by Nicola Griffith, or now the Ancillary series by Anne Leckie, I liked it. I did. And I could appreciate it, but I didn't fall in love with it. It didn't inspire me to read more Le Guin. And then I tried The Wizard of Earthsea, which I think is one of her better known fantasy series. And I read the first one, and they're marketed as children's books. So I think a lot of the people I know who love them started reading them as children. And once again, it just didn't grab me. I haven't even finished the rest of the series. So I kind of thought that Ursula LeGuin was just not for me, and that's okay. And then I started reading her nonfiction, and I completely fell in love with it over the past year. So I really wanted to give another one of her novels a go, and I decided to start with Lavinia because I have a big soft spot for the classics. I considered majoring in the classics. I enjoy all kinds of novels with that kind of theme, and I especially enjoy it when more contemporary authors play with the stories in a way that takes characters that were marginalized in the originals and centers them. So, of course, since that's the idea behind Lavinia, I was on board for that. I also love pastoral novels. I am very much interested in social history, the day-to-day lives of, how people kept themselves fed and clothed and warm and happy in the past. So I knew if anything was going to make me fall in love with LeGuin's fiction, it would be this. And sure enough, it did. I think the book was absolutely beautiful. It managed to both create this really rich, detailed, tactile world that I felt as if I was inhabiting along with Lavinia, while also pondering philosophical questions, both the ones that are in the Aeneid and a lot of Greek literature and some of the more contemporary ones that I experienced as a modern audience. It even had a little bit of meta conversations going on in it between Lavinia and authors, Virgil. And it did all of this in a way that felt so organic, and the novel was so readable that I found it breathtaking. It really, really impressed me, and it made me feel that perhaps I was just not in the right place when I started reading LeGuin, because clearly I need to go and read all of the books that she's ever written now. That's how much I loved it. Yeah, it was so good. If you're considering reading it, I think that you will definitely enjoy it if you share my fondness for that kind of social history type historical fiction, or the classics, or you enjoy strong women leads, or just beautiful writing. I think that those four things would really be reasons to pick this novel up. It's not terribly long, so it's not a huge time commitment, and I feel like you'll know within a few chapters if it's right for you, because the book is very consistent. So if you enjoy those first few chapters, then you're set. And yeah, I loved it. Next up is American Sweethearts by Adriana Herrera. And I believe that I misspoke in my introduction and said I would be talking about American Fairy Tale, which is a different book in the series. She has 4 of them. It's called the Dreamer series. And I love them all. I would definitely highly recommend them. They follow a group of 4 Caribbean men who have grown up in New York City and been friends for a long time, and now they're all in their 30s. And most of them are kind of at new stages in their lives, and it follows their romances as they create their new lives. And 3 of them are gay, and then one of them, the hero of this novel, is bisexual, and that's Juan Pablo. And this is stories focused on him as well as Priscilla, Pris, who they have been on again, off again since high school. And they are both from, I believe, the Dominican Republic originally. Culturally. Anyway, I love the way that Herrera writes characters who are in their 30s and they've got some experience behind them, but they're either at a point where they have to start new things because of their career, or where they're starting to realize that the dreams and plans that they had for themselves when they were in their late teens, early 20s, don't necessarily fit the people that they are now. And as someone who is 34 myself, I can barely even recognize who I was at 17. I mean, obviously some things have stayed the same, but there's been a lot of changes as well. And I really appreciated the way that Herrera captures that feeling of uncertainty, but also a little bit of excitement, but mainly just uncertainty that I think is common to a lot of people in their 30s. It's something that I love. I just love to see myself reflected in fiction, of course. I think we all do. And I think it's something that Herrera captures really beautifully. So Priscilla, in particular, goes on a journey that I just found really meaningful. And it felt as if kind of the author was patting me on my back and telling me that things would be okay. And I think I forgot to mention that these are romance novels, contemporary romance novels, which is a genre that I started reading a few years ago, and I absolutely love it. It has become one of my favorite genres. And I think that at least the authors that I read, they write novels that help heal me. And I think that that is such an underappreciated thing. And yeah, and so I either read a romance novel as my bedtime reading because I don't want to come across something that's going to give me nightmares that late in the day. Or whenever I'm just having a rough time and I find that I can't focus on any other kinds of books or something, there's something about these beautifully written romance novels which center people's emotions so much. Of course, they're romantic emotions, but also just all of their reactions to life. I feel like you're very much in the center of someone's emotional being when you're reading a romance novel. The character's emotional being. And there's something that is very, very touching to me about that and comforting. To me, romance novels are good reminders that we all have doubts and we all have difficult things from our past and that we all deserve love. Back to American Sweethearts. Let's see. So I told you that I loved the way that Priscilla is grappling with whether what she wants now is the same as what she wanted when she was young. I also love the way that, so I'm kind of skeptical of on again, off again, decades-long relationships as a trope, just because, I don't know, I guess I wouldn't have the patience for that kind of thing. But what I love is that Juan Pablo, has very much worked on the issues that made their relationship not work in the past. And he is continuing to work on that. And he catches himself and kind of fixes his reactions to things. And you can really see the effort that he's putting in. And I think that that's really great. I feel like this was very much a novel about the fact that our characters are never set in stone and that we can change things and it will be hard work, but it will be worth it. The other thing that I think that Herrera does beautifully is bring in political questions to a romance, and she does it in a way that she doesn't sugarcoat anything, but for me at least, as a white woman, of course, it never felt traumatic to read any of it. I think that she did a wonderful job of incorporating political questions into it and really inspiring her readers to think deeply about what it means to grow up Caribbean in New York City. What does it mean to live there now? What does it mean to live there as a bisexual man? All those kinds of things. Without it ever feeling as if Priscilla or Juan Pablo are caricatures. Like, they feel like real people. So I very, very much admire Herrera's writing style. I think that she is a masterful author. She has one other novel out, I believe, that I will be reading soon. And I really hope that she's going to write more. Oh, I should also mention, I'm trying to keep this podcast PG because I know quite a few of you listen while your kids are in the room. So I will say that this is a full-blown romance novel with bedroom scenes, and those are really well done. And part of Priscilla's, her new interest and possibly what she wants to make her career with, like one of these realizations she's having about herself, is that she wants to be a sex positive kind of teacher and educator. And that comes across in all of the novel, but in the bedroom scenes as well. So I would recommend this book and really the whole series. I'm never sure with romance novels. It feels like, I especially love that so many romance authors write like 2 to 4 books that are about friends or family members, that are kind of interconnected. And it feels like if you're going to read one, you're going to end up reading them all. But I would especially recommend this book if you're looking for something that is thoughtful and inspiring, but still cozy, and that will make you smile and really remember all that is good about humanity in the end. And that Herrera manages to do this without in any way sugarcoating the world that we live in. So if that sounds like it's your cup of tea, then I highly recommend American Sweethearts and the entire Dreamer series. The final novel that I'm talking about today, and yes, the podcast will mainly be novels, is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily Danforth. And it is a sprawling book. Of course, I read it in the e-version, so I'm not sure exactly how many pages it is in the print version. I suppose I could look it up. One moment. It's a nice thing about recording podcasts on my computer. Let's see. 640 pages, so it is quite a ride. And I would call it, it's a Gothic storyline without Gothic tones. So it's like a Gothic storyline, but with a very, very contemporary 21st century narrator instead of a more Victorian, all-knowing narrator. And that was a really interesting combination. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, honestly, because the description, first, it does mention a boarding school for girls, and I do love boarding school novels. But then it also says that it's a Hollywood satire, and I am not terribly interested in Hollywood or acting. And that is indeed a very large portion of the book. However, very little of it is actually set in Hollywood. A lot of it follows the movie as it's filming, which is in New England. So if you share my hesitation about that, you don't need to worry. And honestly, I'm just going to read you a passage from it because I'm not sure how to describe the tone, and I think that you'll get a better sense of it from me reading it to you. Also, I still have this one on my e-reader. The other 2 had expired and been returned to the library. Okay. Merritt recognized just what a stale romantic gesture another version of herself would have seen this as. Harper driving her to that tree to then kiss her beneath it. Of course she recognized it, but she didn't mind. In fact, right then she felt ready to embrace every stale romantic gesture she'd ever before mocked. Isn't that what the swell of a crush is, after all? Recognizing the flush of truth in all the love cliches? In fact, let me add even another cliche to the mix. She'd never before been kissed like this. And if the echo of the motorcycle were in her legs, and the dull throb at her eyebrow, and the remaining scent of orange blossom mashed in her nostrils, and the glow of those sycamore chandeliers around them were all part of making that sentence true, then so what? So be it. She wanted it, and more and more and more besides. So this is a very exuberant novel. I would definitely think that that's an appropriate adjective. And it moves back and forth in time between the early 20th century and I would say modern times, but I feel like it's really like 2015, 2016. But pretty much contemporary times. And the early story is about a woman who runs a boarding house and her partner, lover, girlfriend, Boston marriage. I'm not sure what the early 20th century term would be. And a series of very dark events happens at the boarding school, and it is full on Gothic darkness. If you are not prepared for some people to meet sad endings, then you should not read this book. It definitely is horror. But then the contemporary story is about 3 young women, 2 of whom are lesbians and 1 of whom is bisexual, who all have an investment in a movie that's being made about what happened at the boarding school. And one of them is a wonderkind author who wrote I think it's a history, not a novel, but it might have been a novel about the boarding school. And her book has been optioned, and that's the basis of the movie. And then the other 2 are actresses who have been cast to play the 2 main leads in the movie. And they're all young. They're all in their early to mid 20s. And this feels very much like a coming of age novel as they're all trying to figure out who they want to be and who they want to love. And meanwhile, things are going wrong on set. So there's still kind of a little bit of a gothic feel to the contemporary story, but in a much more meta, shiny sense. Does that make sense? I feel like most of the gothic novels that I read feel a bit historical, and this does not. This feels shiny. I loved it, though. Like I said, I was skeptical going into it, and I loved it in a different way from the first 2 books that I'm talking about. So maybe I need to come up with more nuanced verbs than loved. So the first 2 books for me are books that I would reread and revisit, especially if I'm in the need for something that feels familiar. Whereas this book, I don't know if I would reread. I felt like it was a really good experience the first time. I'm really glad that I read it. But I don't feel the need to revisit it. I don't really feel the need to spend more time in its world or with its characters. So perhaps I should say I very much enjoyed it, but I did not love it. That seems fair. It is very page-turning. I picked it up when I wasn't feeling that great. My chronic illnesses were flaring. And so I don't have a huge attention span at those times because pain. And I was able to keep reading this one. So the Emily Danforth does a great job of making it page-turning. And like I said, it's a really interesting story. I found it really neat the way that she incorporated a lot of classic Gothic elements, but also just with such, I think it's really the narrative voice, the juxtaposition between aspects of the plot and the narrative voice that make it such a fascinating read. And like I said, I wouldn't reread it. But I would read more books by Danforth. I think that she does a really great job. I don't think this particular book was written for me, but I thought it was wonderful. You can tell I'm out of practice with speaking about books. Who would I recommend this one to? People who are comfortable with a certain amount of experimentation in their fiction, and I guess what I would like contemporary literary fiction, that kind of feel, although the plotline moves much more briskly than a lot of contemporary literary fiction. And anyone who kind of wants a romp and isn't that particular about it feeling a certain way and is all right with kind of the Hollywood aspects of it, you will definitely get a romp and a very self-aware book at one point. So the novel opens with with a couple deaths of young girls who are lesbians, and then within just a chapter or two after that, there's a discussion about like the kill the queers trope. So it's very self-aware, which I appreciated. It's very clever if you're interested in that kind of story. And it definitely has its creepy moments. If you're looking for a book that's a little bit creepy and that you definitely will not forget, this one will stay with me, then I would recommend it. Yeah. It's good. It challenged me, but in a fun way. I hope you enjoyed the inaugural episode of The Charm of It Reads. If there's anything about the books or authors that you think I should be including in these episodes, please let me know. I am trying to keep them on the shorter side compared to the knitting episodes, but I want to make them as informative as possible. Thank you so much to everyone who leaves comments. I really appreciate the time and energy that you put into talking to me, and it really makes my day. Thank you to everyone who leaves likes and subscribes and all of those good things. I find it so encouraging. If you would like to find me in between episodes, I am the Charm of It on Instagram, Ravelry, Library Thing, and Board Game Geek. I think that's all. I hope that you have a wonderful week, and remember, with thanks to Emma Lazarus and Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., until we are all of us cozy, we are none of us cozy. Bye!